So I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about the boof, which is one of the most rewarding strokes in whitewater. There's a lot of videos out there about the boof, and most of them will focus on you in context to the whitewater around you. So your timing, your lead, your angle, your approach angle, your speed, your, how you land the drop, how you exit. I'm gonna do something different in this introduction to the boof. I am gonna just focus really on your internal mechanics between you, your boat, and your paddle, irregardless of the whitewater that's going on around you. And if you're able to do what I talk about today really well, all of those other parts of the boof will matter less. And so you'll be able to be a little offline or, not in quite the right spot and still be able to pull off an effective boof that gets you through the drop. Now, before you continue, this video really does build upon my previous video on core tension and being able to hold and engage good upper body tension in your body. So if you haven't seen that, go ahead and do that before continuing on this video. Some things are just easier to show in a kayak, so I'm gonna get in here. So a lot of people, when you're first starting to learn to boof, might be a little close to that pull. Move over. A lot of people, when you're first learning to boof, you think about, if you think about these steps here are the edge of the drop that you're trying to boof over and across. What they'll do is you'll be like, oh, I see that lip. I'm gonna reach for this lip and I'm gonna pull my boat over the gap that I wanna get through. And there's a couple of problems with this approach. One is typically people are hinging at the waist and leaning forward. When you're in a forward hinged position like this, you're losing out on your maximum power, which is when you're a little more upright and rotated. So you can't really actually create as much forward momentum as you want to. The other issue is when you're hinged and leaning forward like this at the waist, you're sort of trapped in this position. It's very hard to be adaptable to the drop, so you're sort of stuck boofing here, and it's hard to get like a sweeping corrective boof or a boof that corrects your angle from this position. Lastly, if you're boofing from here, your first part of any stroke is going to be your most powerful, so you're spending a lot of energy boofing your shins or your knees across the drop. And if you notice here, my kayak's already still pretty balanced. I'm going to waste all my effective part of my stroke when I don't need it at all. So if you're able to get set up and you're able to wait, and you get set up here, then you're going to wait. You have speed driving you through. You're going to wait for that lip. You notice I'm much closer to my balance point right here. And at this balance point, this is when the stroke is now going to go in, and I'm a little bit more upright. And that boof stroke, that most powerful part of your stroke, is actually going to be propelling the heaviest part of you, which is your body. I think a lot of the goal of a boof really is to get your boat, keep the bow up, get your boat over the drop, but get it over and not just land, but you want to land and keep going. You want to keep as much momentum as you had at the top of the drop, at the bottom of the drop, or even more. Really effective boofs, you can actually accelerate out the bottom, and from a racing context, that's really what you're going for. So the other thing that people do when you're first learning their boof, so you might be reaching forward, maybe you got that all fixed up. It's quite natural to think, so you're still thinking of this idea that you're pulling your boat, or maybe you're pushing your boat off this drop. And whenever that happens, like you're pulling your boat, what I see is it's translated into people's bodies moving backwards. So, or they're pushing their feet over or something, so you move backwards. And then what people eventually learn to do when you first start, you're like, oh, your stroke, and you're like, I'm gonna get a big boof, and you boof, and you're here. And when people are first starting to learn, their bows are dropping, because anytime you lean back in your boat, your bow drops. So then kind of what people learn is, oh, people tell you, oh, you pull up on your knees, so people will start like pulling up on their knees or getting their body back over the top of their boat for when they land. And this sort of style of, pulling, being a little bit back, and then, engaging, re-engaging your abs. You're always, the thing to note here is that there's a loss of engagement in your ab tension in the middle of this boof. So right here, I've lost ab tension, I have to regain it. And you can have a pretty effective boof that way, especially like people will have smaller and smaller time that they're in the back seat. But the core of it is still that you're losing energy. Like you're not translating all of your momentum from the top of the drop into the landing as soon as your core becomes disengaged. And so I'm really going to encourage you to start thinking of your boof a little bit differently, not like pulling your bow or your boat or you over a drop, but think about your paddle when you plant it here as this very strong and very stable pillar that you are connected with your abs here, a lot of core engagement, and then the boof becomes a lot more static in the upper body. You're not going to see my body move back and forward a lot. It's here, and literally the boof is going to look like that motion. It's going to be that small, and a lot of that action is happening in my core. Now, when I do engage my abs on this paddle stroke, my knees do pressure into the thigh braces a little bit, but it's a result of my ab engagement. It's not that I'm pulling up my knees to drive the stroke or to change my body position. So I think I'll go back to that stroke. When you are thinking about doing this more, get a little bit more to the edge, static stroke, where you really, this paddle is firm, and you take this firm stroke, and you notice my body position never gets in the back seat at all. You're here. What happens is that you're able to slingshot your boat past that pole, and the edge of the drop then passes you by. And it's just like a beautiful feeling to be here, and just like this firm, this good boof, and that you're just flying off the drop. Now, you can have a little bit of a follow through, but most of the action is happening in this position. That kind of scenario is quite a bit different than if you're here and you're trying to boof and you're pulling, because when you're pulling, you'll notice, especially this lower blade, how much travel there is on it. I'll have my boof stroke in, I'm going to pull, my body goes back, and then it goes forward. And a lot of people will think they're doing a nice static boof, and just like, it's a little bit more of that type of motion. I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a chair exercise. So I'm going to show you an exercise here that you can do from the safety of your own home to make sure and to teach your body how to maintain good ab tension throughout a boof stroke, so that you know that you're able to internally create some forward momentum with your boof regardless of the river around you. And you can sit in a chair. You got to make sure you've got the right chair and the smooth enough floor, or else this won't work. And here it is. You kind of pretend like you're going to boof, and see if I can get my hands right. You can pretend like you're gonna boof, and then I'm gonna really engage my lower abs and keep them really tight, and then I'm gonna boof. And here's the trick. Maybe I can do it in this side, but I don't even have to do the paddle part. You're here, you've got good posture. I'm gonna keep my feet off the floor. This isn't me pushing on the floor. I'm gonna make this chair scoot forward simply from a little bit of ab engagement, kind of like scooting your foot forward. And it's when you have not your foot forward, you're just gonna scoot your butt almost a little bit forward, but sticking to the chair, so then the chair scoots forward. And that's really different than if you're gonna do a boof stroke and you're here and you pull back. You can see how you're not creating any sort of forward movement in the chair. And you could think of the chair as your boat. So if you're here and you go back at all with this stroke, you're creating backwards momentum. So you can kind of practice this and see if you can scoot that. And that is literally the entire boof stroke. Like, that's all. It's very small motion. If the chair doesn't work for you, you can sit down on the floor and you can practice the same thing. So you can be like this and still ab engagement, body upright, and watch, my body's not gonna go back at all. And you're gonna just scoot your butt a little bit forward every time. And that is the feeling and the mechanics of a boof. You know, you can have a pretty effective boof doing the pull and then bringing your body back forward, but I really encourage you to start working on what I've shown you here of adapting a lot more of a static blade. And the boofs it, just a little bit more like this. You're expending there's a couple of reasons for this. You're expending a lot less energy, for one, and a lot of the energy that you're expending is going directly to moving forward, and you're not wasting any energy moving back. And a lot of this translates into how you land on the drop. With this more core tensioned approach, what'll happen more often when you land, you're gonna land and you're gonna skip, and you're gonna retain a lot more speed at the end of the boof. If you're having a scenario too where you're boofing and you're kind of sinking in when you land, you're kind of losing your forward momentum, or your stern is catching on the oncoming when you're doing a stern squirt. Often that is indicative that when you're landing, you're maybe a little bit in the back seat, or you're not over your boat. And it's that body being over your boat when you land that helps you accelerate forward. Another just big reason is if you can keep a tensioned abbed boof, you're way safer. Your body, it's going to protect your spine from injury when you're coming off of taller drops and even smaller drops. The other big reason here is if you're taking the approach I'm talking about now, your paddle, got my paddle. Your paddle is going to be in this position a lot longer because you're kind of holding this really like awesome steezy looking style here. And so you're going to end up with way better photos because you are never going to be in the back seat. Whereas those times where you're like, I had the sickest boof, and then you look at your photo and you're like, oh. It's probably because you probably did have a pretty good feeling boof, but you probably were in the back seat for a brief moment or second, and that's what got kind of captured on the film. And if none of those reasons are super motivating for you, just go watch some footage of Evan Garcia or some other steezy, really good paddlers, and you're gonna notice that when they boof, they don't have a lot of travel. They don't have a lot of travel in their body and in their paddle. So if you don't believe me, just go watch that footage and try to emulate them. But hopefully what I've shown you here is how to achieve what they look like. With that, I'm gonna let you go and practice this. Take footage of yourself, take video of yourself, really instructive to see what's happening, what's going wrong when. Also, don't just try to practice this on the big drops. like for you, just, you can practice this motion in the chair, on the floor, in the flat water, tiny little holes that you can attain and redo and redo. You can try to get this body mechanic into your muscle memory, and then you'll start just flying off a drop. So have fun, practice hard.